Welcome to Life Design Diaries, the show that gives you permission to live your best life. And this episode is a little bit different. It's an ask episode where one of you have submitted a lovely question via our website and we will answer it. So just before we get to that, if you want to submit your question, please head over to lifedesigndiaries.com/question and you can ask us anything and then we'll answer it on a future episode. This week's question is all about property. It is, can you please give some advice on getting on the property ladder? And also, how do you identify what makes a good investment?
So I think this is a good one for me to ask you a couple of questions, Ross, as you are the property guru of the two of us.
I wouldn't call it that.
Well, you know more about it than me. So let's start with the fundamentals then. So Mr. Saver, how do you save your cash?
Yeah, well, I think you've identified there, Luce, that the first thing is to save. If you're looking to... there's two ways to take this question. One is, are you looking to buy your own house? Or the other one is, are you looking to build an investment property portfolio? And so I'm assuming the kind of latter here. But even if you were going for your own house, really the easiest one and the most conventional one in terms of getting started is to save money for a deposit because, of course, you're going to need to get a mortgage. You're going to need to have a deposit for that. And
that's usually around 10% for your own property and around 25% for an investment property. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's always changing, but generally you need a minimum of 10% to kind of get started with your own property. But as a landlord, it would need, if you're looking to get a buy-to-let mortgage, it would be 25% deposit. So loan to value is 75%. Now, I think saving in itself is just kind of like a fundamental paradigm shift. Certainly, I mean, for me, it's kind of always been the way that I've been wired. And I think that kind of starts at a young age. And I think for you, Luce, it's something which has been more of a skill to learn and sort of practice.
I don't know what you mean.
But it really is. My advice would be that it's the small things, like it's the tiny things every single day added up, which kind of achieved the big gains. Of course, having a really well-paid job helps grow money faster. But it's important to remember that it's not about how much money you earn. It's about how much money you keep. And, there are so many people out there that earn a lot, that spend a lot, and they actually net like nothing or potential loss and things like that. And that's when you start getting into credit cards and debt and stuff. So it's about how you save on just the small things. If anyone hasn't read the book Slight Edge, it's a fundamental book for me that I would advise that you go and read. It just talks about daily behaviors, daily things added up over time, and we've all kind of done or seen people on the calculator when you start looking at, well, if you save this much per day and then that's per how much per week and how much per month, there are really massive savings, I believe, that people can make that will fund deposits by just changing some of their behavior in their everyday spending.
Yeah, I mean, I know firsthand how black and white you are with this. Like, I might like to go shopping and buy a bit of this, buy a bit of that, stop at Starbucks on the way. But Ross is incredibly black and white. Like, there is no Starbucks. There is no Saturday shopping.
Yeah, wow.
No, I'm not saying you're the fun police.
I had a Starbucks once.
No. You are the fun police.
I have, you of course can have a Starbucks.
I'm not saying that you're not fun. I'm just saying that you're very good at being black and white about it. And you're very good at thinking about the bigger picture. And I think that's something that I struggle with. It's like, actually, right now, I really want a chocolate brownie and a caramel macchiato, which is going to cost me £6. But in your head that £6 is going into the pot for this amazing house.
Yeah. So if anyone, like the person who asked the question, how to get on the property ladder, they're, having that vision of having that goal and that vision of saying, okay, that's what I want to do, that will aid this, that would help, because at least it kind of starts with, what's your purpose? What are you saving for? Otherwise, it just feels like you're kind of depriving yourself. Yeah, but, totally. There's got to be compromise. And if you really want to buy a house, if you're renting at the moment, or you're looking to move out and you really want to buy a house for yourself, or you want an investment, then you need to fund it some way. Now, there are more advanced things you can do, but I think this is later on. I think, first of all, it starts with you owning your own house or your own investment property. There are, ways in which you can invest in property and actually put no money in at all, which is a complete surprise to many people, I know, when I tell them that. But there are absolutely ways in which you can buy a property now with no money. And what that means is you just need a business partner, you need an investor, you need someone else. You need to be able to construct a way that you bring something else to the table and you invest with someone else's money. So I think that's more advanced. I think you should start by looking at saving first if you're at the beginning, and then kind of progress on to things like that. But that is a really interesting one, because if there are, just on that subject, there's a lot of people with a lot of money in the bank that are sort of, retiring or, at a bit of an older age, where they don't know where the best sort of investment to make is. And so if you have, the one thing you need to bring to the table there, however, is knowledge. You need to have a great knowledge to be able to source and construct a deal whereby you both benefit financially from that, if they put the money in and you put the kind of knowledge and management in. But so by definition of bringing the knowledge, that is definitely a more advanced way of doing it. So I would say the first thing to start by is save.
Okay, and why do you recommend investing in property?
So we've heavily invested in property in terms of our investments, and do you know what? I think one important thing to say here is that the topic of investing shouldn't be boring. I honestly think so many people see investing as a word, as a thing, as a really boring subject. But if you're talking and thinking about your life, this is directly your life, how you're going to spend your money, how you're going to construct it, how you're going to live your older age, how you're going to live today. Having a good understanding of your finances and having a good financial education to understand investing, just as a topic, money, it shouldn't be a negative word. It should be something which I think everyone is dead interested in, because you can't just rely on a salary and money in the bank and 0.5% return from the bank interest at the moment, or something crazy like that. So, it's essentially taking an interest into your wealth and your life and how you're going to live it. So I think that's really key. First of all, is take an interest in investing. Then the question you just asked them was about property. Now, property is a type of investment. Of course, there's loads of other ways that you can invest. There's loads of, the stock market is a classic one to invest in. Anything that's rare or precious that you could earn kind of royalties or that will grow in its value would be an investment. So a classic car, classic cars have gone for a huge boom in the last sort of 10 years, massive. So, you could have invested in classic cars then, or you could decide to invest in classic cars now. Jewelry, diamonds go up in value. So there's so many different things to invest in. It doesn't have to.
So the next investment could be something diamond related?
I've already invested in that. So property. Why property? I mean, I was attracted to property because it's kind of tried and tested. Like, if you look at the data and if you really look at it kind of analytically and over the long term, property has gone up in value, and there's fundamental factors which decide that. It's just the law of supply and demand. Fundamentally, there is not enough supply to feed the demand. So the demand is the number of people living in this world. People living in England is rising because of all of the factors with healthcare, etc. There's more and more people on the planet now. I heard the other day there's more people alive today than has ever died in this world. So that just kind of shows just how many people there are, and that's growing. And there's only a limited amount of land because the world is the world at the end of the day. So supply and demand says there's going to be a big demand and an ever growing demand and a not decreasing supply, but a supply which cannot keep up with that demand. So just by the laws of supply and demand, that means prices rise because there's more competition, there's more demand. So fundamentally, that's kind of telling you that property prices are going to rise. And we've seen that, over the last hundreds of years, we've seen property prices rise. And if I'm particularly focused on England when I'm saying this, but they have across the world, they have. And just some kind of facts which really stood out for me when I was looking to get into investing. In England, the average number of years over the last, I think it's the last 150 years, the average number of years it's taken for property prices to double as an average across the UK. So it's kind of taken into account London's huge rises and other areas' decreases. As an average to double in price, it's been 9 years. And so that was just crazy for me. And the longest it's been to double in price on average is 14 years. And the shortest was something like 3 years during the kind of boom. So in like 2007, I think. So fundamentally, the price is going up, which is always a good thing to invest in. That would kind of be my initial one. And secondary is when you invest in property, it's not just the capital gain that you can receive in prices going up, but also the rental income that you can receive monthly. So it's an investment which pays you back not just over the long term, but actually immediately. If we have a property today, then this month there'll be income if it's properly tenanted, etc., and paid on time. So there's kind of immediate gains as well as long-term gains. But I must say, I haven't said at the start of this episode, I'm not a financial you said guru. I'm not a financial advisor, so this is just kind of my own thoughts really and my own perspective. And of course, with any investment, the biggest downside is that it can go down. There are risks,
Bitcoin, yeah. Anyway, so next one. You're a guru to me, Ross. Don't put yourself down. How do you identify a good investment?
So again, if you're looking at property, you have to look at the fundamentals. And what I mean by that is, is it in a growing area? Is the economy growing around it? Because all that's going to dictate the price, whether that grows.
And there's some really good tools like Deloitte. I think it's every 6 months, they do like a crane count around the UK. So which cities and which areas are, obviously there's other ways that you can tell economic growth. But actually, if you're looking to buy off plan and try and get in there are some really good tools out there for you to be able to identify which cities are good to invest in.
Yeah. And if you haven't watched, there's an amazing YouTube video. It's only 30 minutes long. It's by Ray Dalio. He's a huge, wealthy, famous investor. And it's called How the Economic Machine Works. And it just kind of talks through the economy in I've never seen, it's probably the best YouTube video I've ever watched. So highly, highly recommended to go and watch that. And what was the question?
Identify a good investment.
Oh, so good fundamentals. So is it in a good area? Is it in a growing area? Is it like little things like who would potentially rent it? If you're looking to rent it out, who would rent that? If you're buying a 4-bed, which is kind of more typical for a family, then is there a school nearby? Things like having schools and transport links. Is there a train nearby? All kind of add to the fundamentals of the property that are going to increase its chances, I guess, of going up in price.
Yeah. Also things like, is the type of building quite exclusive? So one of the properties we own, which was our home, was an old cotton mill, and there's only a limited supply of those, and that's becoming more and more desirable in terms of the rental income, but also the overall cost of that is increasing, isn't it?
The price, yeah, definitely. Because people like things that are, more rare, less easy to obtain. And so if there's anything that you can get on a property which kind of falls into that rarity or, exclusive, then it's going to rise faster than, say, a new build. Mm. So definitely just need to think of look into the fundamentals of it. And on area, so a big thing that people would be talking about now is when to invest in the property market. And especially because it's widely kind of publicized that potentially we could see a significant house prices fall in the next year or two, few years. We're kind of ready for a crash, a big crash that's all over the news. Now, first thing I'd say about that is it can happen and has happened in the past. 2008 house prices went down massively. But it's actually been a while since I looked at the stats on that. But I'm pretty sure that within a number of years, if you actually looked at the data, there was house prices which were back up in certain areas straight away. But the thing is, the news the news is there to sell papers, so it only publicizes the downside. It's like crash, crash, crash. But when things go up 5%, 3%, 4% every month, every week, every whatever, that's not publicized because that's just average, boring, house price rises. And so it feels like sometimes when you're looking at the media, there's just constant, crashes going on around you. Yeah, in the stock market. And people are always seem to be hesitant to invest in anything, property or the stock market, when it seems high. Because everyone assumes that when things are high, they're going to come down. But again, that's when you look at the fundamental supply and demand, economics behind it. Because if something's high now, so you could hear something, if we're slightly switching to the stock market, you could hear that, Amazon right now is at an all-time high. And your initial, well, certainly mine, before I really looked into things, was that because it's an all-time high, it's due to come down, because that's how you see these graphs happen. They go up and then they go down. However, if you take a long-term view and you look at 10 years of, say, Amazon or Apple or Facebook or any of these kind of tech companies, well, at each stage at that graph throughout those years, they were at an all-time high and it continued to rise. So it's not necessarily that when something's high, it will then come down after. You just need to look at the fundamentals behind that. What is the value of the company? And look into all of those as opposed to just kind of having a knee-jerk reaction to something's high, therefore it must come down. There's way, way more to it. I mean, there's way more to all of this than kind of my brief summary, but I'm trying to give an overview of sort of the lessons I've learned.
And what would be your biggest piece of advice to someone looking to get on the property ladder?
To educate yourself, 100%. I think there's so many different options to do. One thing I read when I was really looking into property, like at the start before I'd invested, and didn't know when to go in and things. I was slightly hesitant about, because it's a big chunk of money that you're putting faith in investing in property, especially your first one. But I just read, it said, rather than wait to invest in property, it said invest in property and wait. So it kind of just said, just get in. That's the sort of initial thing. And I said then about property goes up and down in price. Well, it's really, really important that you've got good cash flow, in any in any business, but of course with property, because you've got to expect the worst and you've got to predict the worst. So, if anyone now thinks of 2008 and they think of, the huge global recession and property prices crashing and everyone, out of jobs and things like that. Well, if you were in that scenario, or if that is to happen again, but you've got a good source of income, then your property price can dip. It can go down 20, 30, 40, even 50%. If you can still afford the mortgage payments on that, if you've still got cash flow and you can basically ride it out, and what you're waiting for is you're riding out and waiting for the underlying fundamental laws of supply and demand to take effect and, bring the property price back up to where it was. The real trouble is when you haven't got that cash flow and you are forced to sell at that point. That's, of course, when you hear the horror stories that someone bought a house for a certain price and it went down 50% and they had to sell and they lost so much and now they're in debt. So I just think the number one piece of advice is educate yourself, really, really look into it. I would say one of the best podcasts out there in general is the property podcast. I know a lot of people who listen to the show also listen to that already, but if you don't, head over to the property podcast. It's really, really good. Some great advice. They've been going for ages now. And so I think, to kind of summarize, property is an investment. It's a type of investment. I think it's fundamentally strong because over the years, over the long term, you can see its performance. Not only does it go up in price in the long term, but also it can provide, month by month revenue. So it's kind of different to other investments in that respect, really. But I would caveat by saying any investment can go down, and you need to kind of know what you're doing. And if anyone wants more information, and get in touch directly, just send us an email. Our email's on our website, lifedesigndiaries.com. I'm more than happy to kind of help on a one-to-one basis and see if I can support with the knowledge that I've learned. But educate yourself. Absolutely understand. Not just the property; it goes bigger than that. It's the economy. It's wider than just property. Property just falls into part of that, really. And I think once you do that, once you have a good understanding of the property world, the economy as a whole, it kind of opens your eyes to just how things work. And I think that will benefit you in many more ways than just property. We hope you found that useful, guys, and once again, thank you so much for listening. As I said before, if you want to contribute yourself and ask your own question, remember, it's totally 100% anonymous. Head over to lifedesigndiaries.com/question, fill in the form, click submit, and we will answer it in a future episode.